Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I thought I'd speak a little bit today about a topic I haven't dealt with in a while, which is the law of karma, Kamma, to elucidate or attempt to elucidate some of the aspects and meaning of that important principle. It is part of conventional right view. The Buddha spoke about having right view includes the idea of cause and effect and the idea of karma, rebirth, this world and the other world. Kamma is a special case of the more general law of causation, of dependent origination, that things arise according to causes and conditions and not otherwise. And Kamma is one of the laws or means by which reality unfolds for us. It's not the only one, but it's one that has big effect or impact on our experience. When the Buddha spoke about Kamma in the suttas, he usually spoke about it in a very general way relating to stations of rebirth. The karma we make in this life determines where we're going to be reborn in the future, into what condition. For example, there's one sutta where he's speaking about different qualities possessed by human beings and where they've arisen from. Some are strong, some are weak, some are healthy, some are sickly, some are beautiful, some are ugly, some are intelligent, some are stupid. And then he talks about the different ways and means these come about. They say that intelligence or otherwise is a result of having taken an interest in the Dhamma in previous lives. Beauty comes from having a kindly disposition in previous lives, and ugliness comes from being nasty and mean and angry in your past life. So on. Then there's an even more general application in terms of the particular station of rebirth, whether one is born as an animal or a human or a dewa, etc. It's only when we get into the Abhidhamma that the approach to Kamma is at a more kind of fine-grained level, talking about specific mind moments, incidents related to Kamma. Consciousness moments in the Abhidhamma are divided in different ways, and one of the divisions is between those which are Kamma making. These are the jhana moments, the moments when we make Kamma, we make a decision, and then there are the moments when we receive Kamma, which includes every moment of sense perception. And this is Kamma Vipaka, Kamma resultant. There is a bit of a controversy around this, in that the Buddha in the suttas, in one passage when he's talking about different kinds of false view, he lists as one of the false views the view that everything is determined by Kamma. So then some people have said this contradicts the teaching in the Abhidhamma, that every sense impression has as one of its causes previous Kamma. But if you take the context of the Buddhist statement, it's not a contradiction. What he was contradicting there, or what he was refuting there, was the view of Makkhali, which was a hard determinism. It was a philosophy in India that, um, and there's also been versions in the West of a hard determinism, that we have no free will, that everything we do is like we're just acting out a script. Makkhali was famous for illustrating his theory by unrolling a ball of yarn. And he says this ball of yarn represents the lives of beings. You're just walking along this path, and everybody goes through every different station of possibility of existence over eons of time in a fixed order. And the different beings in the world are just there at different places along the path. But eventually, everyone's going to be a billy goat or Brahma god, or, in their proper place, in their proper turn. And there's nothing you can do about it. And in fact, actions that you do are just acting out the script, predetermined. So the Buddha was refuting that view, and he was saying we do have free will, we do make choices, our actions are ultimately free, but they have consequences. And the consequences are the Kamma resultant. So if we take that Abhidhamma model, some interesting or worthy of contemplation, some implications of this. One is that Kamma is made only in the jhana moments, and the jhana moments are part of the cognitive series, and they only arise in a complete series. And what this means is that there are some series that are cut short when we're not fully conscious, we're not fully aware or awake. We might not reach the later series. So jhana is made, but not in every case of a moment of cognition. A lot of times we're just acting by habit. This is also the idea of habitual kamma, that a lot of time we are acting as if we're acting out a script, because we don't make the effort to do something different, and then we just follow the path of least resistance. There's Ajahn Chah's metaphor of driving an ox cart. In old Thailand, the transportation was often by these ox carts that had very big wheels with a narrow rim, and they were pulled by a water buffalo. And the guy would sit in the cart, and the water buffalo would pull him along. And these big wheels would cut ruts in the mud, and they would harden up in the dry season and become very, very hard ruts. And if you were going from one village to another that got a lot of traffic, you could just fall asleep in the cart, take it easy, and the buffalo would just following the path of least resistance, would just keep chugging along, pulling the cart even around corners, because it was easier to go around the corner, had the less resistance because of the ruts. But if you wanted to go someplace else that didn't get a lot of traffic, you had to stay alert and awake and pick the right spot to make the turn, get out of your cart, and unhook the water buffalo, wrestle the cart out of the ruts, then chase the water buffalo who's wandered off and drag him back, hook him up, and then you have to stay awake the rest of the way to keep an eye that you're going in the right direction. And this is like our mind following actions in life, a lot of times we're just following the rut, the path of least resistance that's been laid down by previous Kamma, this habituated Kamma. The mind tends to do this more easily, the same things over and over. But if you want to break a habit, do something new, something different, it takes an effort. It takes being awake, being mindful, and it takes application of energy. And you have to make an effort, to break out of that rut. One other detail about this idea of habituated Kamma is most of the time we probably associate that with bad habits or lazy, slothful ways. But you can also use this principle for good, and you can habituate yourself to something skillful. Like, example is making a habit of doing a meditation sit every day at the same time. This is often people ask me, particularly after a retreat, people ask me about daily practice. What should I do for daily practice? And I always say the most important point is consistency. That you do it whether you want to or not, and it helps if you do it at the same time every day, so it becomes fixed. And after some time, that becomes like a fixed habit, and you're just doing it again and again every day without making an effort. So you can establish healthy or positive habits, just by repetition. Kamma also has what we may call an ethical dimension. So another of the divisions of consciousness in the Abhidhamma is between skillful and unskillful, kusala and akusala, and profitable and unprofitable. So a skillful moment of making Kamma results in a profitable moment of receiving Kamma, or sets the conditions for. Couldn't say it directly causes it, because there's other causes. I'll explain this a bit later, but I want to make this point about the ethical dimension. And the language uses kusala and akusala, skillful and unskillful. This is not the language of good and evil. This is the language of navigating skillfully the conditions of the world. That each moment when you do something by body, speech, or mind, you are making Kamma. So if you can make it skillfully or unskillfully, you can establish, by skillful actions, you establish conditions for good results or profitable results for yourself in the future. Or if you make unskillful actions, then you're making trouble for yourself in the future. You're going to receive unpleasant or unprofitable resultants. Now, the idea of multiple causes, this is a principle or an axiom that nothing arises without a cause and nothing arises from a single cause. It's a kind of a lazy way of thinking, a simplified way of thinking is to say, A causes B. It's actually a combination of, many different factors that cause any event. In the Abhidhamma, there's a whole big long book, the Patana, on analyzing different types of causation. There's also the idea of from the commentaries is the idea of niyamas. There are different niyamas or causal factors or forces, one of which is Kamma niyama, but there's also Dhamma niyama, Chitta niyama, Utu niyama. There's several others that relate to the mind, to the external environment, and to physical laws or nature. And these come together in any event that occurs. It comes together in these various factors, quantified together. So if you've made Kamma in the past for good or bad, that sets a condition that allows an experience in the future. It doesn't determine a specific experience so much as it sets a condition, and then other factors from the external world contribute, allowing you to have that experience. I'll give a concrete example that may be slightly extreme, but this came up, I don't know, it was more than a decade ago. There was, if you remember, there was a really terrible tsunami in Asia, and many thousands of people were killed. Sri Lanka was the hardest hit, but many other countries were hit with this tsunami. And I was giving a public talk somewhere after that, and the audience was about maybe half Sri Lankan people and half Westerners. And somebody asked me the question, how could you explain the people dying in the tsunami according to the law of Kamma? It seems kind of random that just, a wave comes and kills a bunch of people. And I thought about it, and the way I think it works when there's a mass event and everybody receives, at the simplest level, everybody's receiving the same sense impression at that moment of, death by drowning. How it would work in terms how it could be explained in accordance with the law of Kamma is that everybody has led multiple lifetimes in many different states and conditions in the past, and many people may have made a Kamma that sets the condition for death by drowning. They may be suffocated beings, or they did something in the past that would have that as an appropriate resultant. But then they might spend several lifetimes without external conditions coming together to let that Kamma manifest. And then one day there's an earthquake in the ocean, and the earthquake has nothing at all to do with Kamma. It's a purely physical, natural event in the plates of the earth rubbing together. It's nothing to do with human action whatsoever. And that causes a tsunami and a big wave. And this allows the condition for all those beings who have the appropriate karmic preset condition to experience death by drowning. This Kamma comes to the surface and they experience it at that moment. And after an event like that, you hear stories. There's always some people who escape, and someone will say, well, I don't know what came over me. I just had the urge that morning to go up country to the market town up the hill, and it's lucky I did. I would have been killed. And there's always some people like that. They would be the ones that did not have the condition to die by drowning. So after I give this explanation, we had a curious reaction from the audience. A few of the Sri Lankan people actually came up to me afterwards and thanked me very much, and they said that explains it very well, and it put my mind at ease. Now, makes sense to me. But a few of the Westerners were quite upset that that you would explain something in that way. It's like they had the feeling that it's sort of like blaming the victim. It's saying it's your own fault, when anything bad. And this is one of the problems that arises in a general way with people that hearing about the law of Kamma. When something bad happens, they say, well, that's pretty heartless. You're saying, they did it themselves. You're blaming them for their own, misfortune. So I think that comes from a mis misunderstanding or a false analogy that many people in the West, even if they were not raised as Christians, they still have that cultural background from Christianity, and they're seeing things implicitly in terms of justice being meted out. That there's like a this divine justice. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get punished. And it's not reward and punishment. Karma is not shouldn't be thought of as reward and punishment or as justice. It's best compared to a natural law, like the natural laws of physics. Like the closest analogy would be conservation laws in physics, like the law of conservation of momentum. If you have a closed system, and you could take the universe as a whole as a closed system, it's probably the only true closed system that exists. But any closed system is just as an abstraction. If you take a closed system, excluding any external influence, and you perturb part of that system, other parts will change their behavior to compensate. An explanation of this in terms of the law of conservation of momentum, which means that in the case of, say, a rotary system like a planet orbiting around the sun, or some kind of motion like that, it's a result of the total momentum is a result of the mass and the velocity of the vector. So they give the example. It's a classic example given as a figure skater twirling around, and she's got her arms outspread, and then if she puts her hands together over her head so her arms aren't spread anymore, she'll speed up. That's an application of conservation of momentum, because you now have the mass is more concentrated, so the whole total, to make the math work out, the system has to spin faster. So if you disturb one aspect of the system, another part will change to compensate. Kamma is like that, in that every action that we do perturbs the universe in a small way. It's like a ripple in a pond. We're perturbing the system. We're shaking it off balance, off center, and then the system shrugs and shakes and comes back to balance, and you receive the result of that at some later time. Now, seeing the laws of karma as a natural law in this way, in one sense, it's more ruthless than the idea of divine justice, because there's no possibility of mercy or special pleading or exemptions. This is the result. It's like expecting gravity to give you a break when you fall off the ladder. You say, "Oh, please, gravity, don't accelerate me that fast to the ground." you Karma just unfolds according to cause and condition. Another aspect of karma that's important to understand is that karma always, in the Buddhist understanding of karma, it always originates in the mind with deliberate mental action. And this was a difference between the Buddhist and the Jain understanding of karma. The Jain philosophy had what they call three-door karma: body, speech, and mind. And the Buddhist system is ultimately, it is expressed, our actions are expressed in speech and body, but they originate only in the mind. So something done with the body unknowingly doesn't bear karmic weight And the example given is stepping on a beetle in the dark. To a Jain, that's an act of Kamma, of killing. It's a serious offense. But to a Buddhist, there's no Kamma. There's no Kamma made by doing that. I don't suppose it makes much difference one way or the other to the beetle, but for the actor, for the person, Kamma is only made if the action originates in the mind. So we make if you stomp on a beetle in the daylight, you're having a volitional moment. You want to kill that thing, and you stomp on it. But if you just walking across the room in the dark and you don't even know it, you've stepped on a beetle, then you're not making any Kamma of killing. So Kamma originates in the mind, and there's even a degree of Kamma associated with thought. It's much lighter, more tenuous than if it expresses itself in body or speech, because that if you express it outwardly, that takes more energy and force to. So it's a heavier perturbation of the universe. To people with a kind of materialist bent, the law of karma doesn't seem possible. They don't see a mechanism of why something you've done maybe lifetimes ago will result in some occurrence in this life. From the classical Buddhist point of view, there's the principle that mind is the forerunner, mind is the chief, mind is the comes before the body, as the ox comes before the cart. So mind is the originator, and physicality flows outwards as a resultant. One extreme version of this view is the mind-only view, that only mind is real. Some schools of Buddhism have held that in the past, but all schools would agree maybe disagree on details of the mechanism, but agree that mind is a major causal factor in the universe, in our experience and in the world. And that way of thinking would have sounded very unlikely and woolly-minded, maybe, to a 19th century physicist, but to a 20th or 21st century physicist, it makes more intuitive sense. Because with quantum mechanics, it's very difficult to interpret the quantum effects without giving a causal effect to mind. This is what they call the observer effect. That observing an event just by taking it into consciousness affects it, causes it to unfold differently. And there have been different ways of trying to interpret this. For a long time, the mainstream view was the Copenhagen interpretation. It still may be, for as far I don't know, or some version of that. But the Copenhagen interpretation holds that reality is a potential field only, that it's a probability field. So there are infinite possibilities, but in a not evenly distributed. There's a probability wave. You can see a peak where this electron is going to be most likely at point A, but it's not fixed at point A. It has a spread. There's also a chance it could be a little on either side, or a very small chance it could be quite far away. And it only becomes fixed when you take a measurement, when you observe it. They call that collapsing the wave function. So this concrete manifestation only occurs when consciousness is applied to the field of potential. And this fits very neatly into the idea of Kamma, that you have a wave function of reality. And this has been shaped and modulated by your Kamma. And then an individual event is kind of forced or picked out of that by consciousness. And we're creating the reality we experience with our mind. There's a Jataka story that illustrates this idea of Kamma manifesting a potential, a reality out of a potential field. It involves a man who went to the Naga kingdom. And there are a number of stories in the Jatakas of a human being who is taken to the Naga kingdom. It's usually he saved the Naga. The Naga comes to earth in the form of a snake and is in trouble, and he saves it. So then they reward him by taking him to the Naga kingdom. And there he experiences pleasure. He lives in a Naga palace of crystal and lapis lazuli, and he's waited on by 50 or 100 or some other ridiculous number of beautiful Naga maidens, and he's fed delicious food every day and enjoys all the sense pleasures of the Naga kingdom. There's one story has a little variation to it. One of these fellows was a scoundrel. He was some kind of a con man on the earth, and he tricked his way into the Naga kingdom. And he hadn't earned it. He didn't deserve it. He didn't have the Kamma to experience it. So he was in the same palace, with the same Naga maiden servants and the same food, but his perception of them was that he was in a dark dungeon, and the Naga maidens were ferocious yakas, and the food was horrible, poisonous muck. And he couldn't bear it. So the only difference was his Kamma. And these other realms are generally portrayed as being more fluid in terms of fixed reality. So these kind of laws play out in a more manifest, obvious way. But in our own experience, we have our surroundings are determined to some degree by creative force of our previous Kamma, but also our perception of them is determined by the mind and what we're ready to perceive. And when I was in Thailand, I was staying in Taodam in the jungle, and I got a letter from somebody back home, and he said he was envious of me living in this beautiful jungle, and he's stuck in a horrible, smelly city, And my reply was, you have, this, I do enjoy it here, but you have to recognize how much is a factor of perception. That somebody could perceive the jungle as being, terrifying, full of snakes and scorpions, and always wet and uncomfortable, and it's a miserable place, and they just wish they were in a nice, clean, modern city with gleaming skyscrapers and subways to whisk you here and there, and all this conveniences. And the external conditions are the same, but the perception, the feeling of the person, how they experience it is different. Dogen, the Zen master Dogen, goes so far in his Rivers and Mountains Sutra, which is a really, really fascinating text. He goes so far in that sutra to attribute all the difference between the 5 or 6 realms of existence to differences of the individual Kamma. And his example is the river, that someone in the human realm sees a river as a flowing water. Someone in the hell realm sees it as boiling lava. And someone in the Naga realm sees it as a kingdom full of crystal palaces. external reality is the same in all cases. Mm. So the interface between reality and perception, mind and universe is not an easy matter to unravel. It's complicated by many factors. It's not a dead simple thing. And Kamma gives us the teaching of Kamma gives us one aspect of that whole picture to give us a sense of how we can skillfully navigate it. And the last point before I conclude, the last point I'd like to make is in terms of understanding, skillfully understanding Kamma and incorporating it, using it, should always be future oriented, not past oriented. What I mean by that is some people, when they hear about Kamma and rebirth, they become fascinated with trying to figure out or wondering about their past lives. How did I get to here, and where was I in the past? And um, there's not a great deal of value in that because there's nothing you can do about it. Your past is fixed. It's done is done. But what does count and matter is going forward into the future. What kind of conditions are you setting up now for a future experience? One little exercise to to do with contemplation, to do with the mind, sometimes try to imagine this life as a past life. Like what traces in this life, what conditions are you making that will in the future have some result? So I think I'll stop there.